Thank you for that introduction, David. I didn't realise I'd written such a big bio. Okay. Right. Thank you very much for the opportunity of presenting ASMI to you today. Got quite a lot to say in a short time, so please excuse that I'm going to be staying on script. The Australian Self-Medication Industry Association, or ASMI, represents the sponsors of non-prescription category, including obviously over-the-counters, OTCs and complementary medicines. So ASMI members make up some 80% of the 5 billion plus non-prescription market. So I'm going to be covering 3 topics today, 2 of them very briefly. Most of my time will be spent on number 2, which is the Schedule 3 consumer advertising. So quickly starting with State of Industry update. OTCs, which you can see represented by the blue bars, have been growing healthily in the double-digit area for the last 3 years. Little slowdown in 2016, given some uncertainty affecting products that are bought for offshore demand. Having said that, 11.5% growth is still very healthy. As a percentage of our share of total pharmacy, it dropped a little because in 2016, obviously the prescription market had a very buoyant year. So just a little detail, not too much, on the top 10 non-prescription categories. The size of categories on the left and the growth percentages are on the right. And you can see some very strong growth from infant formula and VMS categories, with traditional OTC categories, though, still showing very strong single-digit up to double-digit growth, which is pretty good given the maturity of those sectors. What's going to be very interesting, of course, over the next coming years is the impact of coding to the OTC pain segment. So that's just a very quick flavour of where the market's at. So the big focus of my few minutes today, which is an important area for pharmacy and the industry, is Schedule 3 medicines. You may recall that ASMI presented a new and different advertising model for Schedule 3 products at last year's APP. And actually, last time I stood before you here 5 years ago, I remember introducing the idea of a different advertising model for S3s. 5 years. The regulatory change is slow. So just to refresh your memories for those who recall last year, the model was made up of 2 parts, a pharmacy element and a consumer element. The pharmacy element involves the national distribution of clinical protocols and product information prior to, and that's very important, prior to any S3 product advertising, if we can bring that to bear. Then, that's followed then by infomercial style of consumer advertising, which would mandate equal prominence to 3 given parts. That's running the pie. The first part being disease state and condition awareness. The second, branded product information, that is how the offer may help. And the third, and really important and critical, is the importance of the pharmacist role in determining whether the advertised product therapy is actually right for the consumer. Now, ASMI's been advocating this model become the default position for S3 products, with the exception of those products where it would not be appropriate. For example, products that can be abused or misused, etc. Now, as you know, currently S3s are non-advertisable except by exception. That's Appendix H. And we propose turning that around the other way, so advertisable unless by exception. So we've got a mock ad to play in a moment which demonstrates the infomercial style of consumer advertising that we've been talking about. In this instance, we've picked an existing S3 category of cold sore and an existing S3 molecule of famciclovir and created a fictitious brand called Brand Fam to demonstrate the concept. Can we play the video now, please?
You know when the tingle starts, that a cold sore is on its way. Now there's a new option available only from your pharmacist. Introducing Brand Fam. A new once-only dose taken orally at the first sign of a tingle. It relieves the symptoms fast and reduces the length of a cold sore attack with no mess. Talk to your pharmacist about your cold sore symptoms, and they will determine whether Brandfam is the right treatment for you. Find out more. Ask your pharmacist.
Okay, now need to go back. We've been advertising or advocating for this S3 model to be embedded in legislation. However, the government asked us to demonstrate with evidence the impact of such an approach on public health. So we tested this mock ad among consumers, pharmacists and pharmacy assistants to understand the impact on QUM. We commissioned the University of Technology, Sydney, their Centre for Health Economics Research and Evaluation, and that's too much to say that often, so I'll just say SHARE, to undertake this research. And SHARE are renowned experts in health economics and public health. Discrete choice modelling was the methodology, and we saved a very robust sample, as you can see there, of just under 1,300 consumers, half of whom were sufferers of cold sores and half of whom were not, and around 500 pharmacists and pharmacy assistants, 500 of them as well. The top-line results are very encouraging and put to bed, we hope, some myths and misnomers about the role and impact of S3 advertising. So very quickly, through some very top-line results. So firstly, it was clear that advertising did influence consumers' health-seeking behaviour. Specifically, those who saw the advertising were more likely to visit a pharmacist than a GP. Now, just on this data, the blue bar is the test group. They're the ones who saw the advertising and then went through the model. And the yellow was the control group, who didn't see the advertising. The takeout here is the advertising of minor ailments treatments like S3 famciclovir leads to better use of healthcare resources for minor ailment management. Let me just build the slide. When we dug a little deeper, we found that creating awareness of S3 category and products made consumers more likely to visit a pharmacy for health advice for other minor ailments. So not just the advertised one. This approach raised consumers' recall of the pharmacist's role in general. Consumers were also extremely comfortable with the pharmacist determining whether the product was right for them or not. So the conclusion here is that under the advertising test group, S3 advertising drove more health conversations between consumers and pharmacists, which is a great outcome. And it also showed that it was unlikely the advertising would lead to inappropriate demand for the brand advertising, because the consumer was very comfortable in letting the pharmacist decide if that product was right for them or not. It was pharmacist recommendation that was the most important thing for consumers under the advertising test group, and almost more important for them than under the control group. Now, what about pharmacist results? Unlike the consumer results, the pharmacist and pharmacy assistants were not overtly influenced by the advertising, with very similar results between the test group and the control group. The only significant driver to recommendation was whether the therapy was appropriate for the consumer's symptoms and conditions. So as you can see from the highlighted section in the box at the top, so again, interestingly, pharmacists were more scrutinising of the appropriateness of the therapy for the advertising test group. And again, another very, very good outcome. The other interesting results here were around pharmacists' comfort in referring or denying consumers. What we found was the vast majority of pharmacists were extremely comfortable in denying the consumer's direct brand request. Furthermore, pharmacists were very comfortable in referring the customers to their GP if necessary. So again, the right outcomes. So when we concluded the research, we reviewed the evidence alongside some of the common misconceptions about consumer S3 advertising. The first myth being that medicine just sells the brand advertised. The research demonstrated that the S3 advertising increased consumer awareness of therapeutic options available and pharmacy services, and the S3 advertising drove more health conversations between pharmacists and consumers. Again, as I said, a really important result, and it results in better QUM outcomes for consumers. The second myth was that advertising drives inappropriate demand, and the evidence showed that consumers were very comfortable with pharmacists determining whether the advertised S3 product was right for them or not, so therefore unlikely to result in inappropriate demand. And then the third myth was that pharmacists buckle under the pressure of consumer demand generated by advertising. And what the research found was that pharmacists appropriately triaged their consumers, and if the advertised product was not deemed appropriate, a better suited course of action was recommended. That could be a referral to the GP or an alternative product, thereby dispelling the myth. So what are the key benefits of the proposed S3 advertising model? For consumers, it's increasing the awareness of conditions, therapeutic options, and services provided by pharmacy. But it also increases the health conversations that they would have with the pharmacist to drive better outcomes. For the government, obviously, it's the avoidance of unnecessary doctor visits for minor ailments, which could be treated with an OTC and by the pharmacist. And for pharmacists, the model ensures that pharmacy are fully informed about S3 categories and products prior to consumer advertising commencing. The infomercial-style approach enables and drives improved conversations between consumers and pharmacists, but also enables the pharmacist to manage consumer requests and expectations. So finally, it's good for industry because the proposed model will encourage industry to reinvest back into S3s and prescription to OTC switch again to drive further front-of-shop growth for you in the future. So the next step here is for us to feed these findings into the government's medicines scheduling framework review, which is slated for this month, for consultation. And the advertising of S3s is included. But what do we need from you? We need you. We need the Guild and pharmacists to make comment and submissions, including your response to this S3 advertising model and proposal. Because we believe this significantly lifts the role of pharmacy in delivering best consumer healthcare outcomes. And my point here is, if pharmacy do not make comment and submissions for this change, the only thing the regulator and government will hear will be from the GPs and the naysayers. And I'll stand here in 5 years' time still advocating for such a model. So please. So let me just close on the third topic with some other growth opportunities for pharmacy. I've already spoken at length about reigniting S3s through the model. If we get the model, then hopefully that will drive RX to OTC switch. Now that's a great opportunity. You only have to look across the Tasman, for example, to see what other exciting opportunities there are with erectile dysfunction and contraceptive pill, to name just a couple. Comp Meds, over the years, has morphed from fringe to mainstream, overtaking in size traditional OTC categories. Offshore demand has combined with local strong consumer acceptance to fuel the growth. Of course, CMs continue to be scrutinised by the regulator, media and academics, and that's where pharmacy plays a critical role to help the consumer separate out the wheat from the chaff by advising the consumer on what evidence and efficacy data there is on complementary medicines to help inform consumers' choice. And then the last one, offshore demand, we've often called that the China factor. It continues to evolve, potentially beyond China and beyond infant formula and complementary medicines into other categories such as personal care and OTCs. So with that, I hope I've given you a brief summary of the state of play and a brief overview of the opportunity areas for pharmacies. And please forgive the fact that I spent most of the time on what I see as the most critical one, S3 advertising. Thank you.